For the sake of YouTube's strict copyright rules, this episode of Awesome Albums doesn't include the music. You are welcome to continue watching this version, but I recommend going to the Awesome Albums website or the other link below to enjoy the Awesome Albums episode the way I intended it to be heard. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Awesome Albums with Awesome Andrew. Today we are continuing our look at The Who's 1973 album, Quadrophenia. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out part 1 where we go through the history and making of the album, the following tour promoting the album, and the album cover and gatefold, link in the description below. With that out of the way, let's reintroduce the band and then get started on the music. Roger Daltrey, our lead singer. John Entwistle on bass, horns, and some vocals. Keith Moon on drums, percussion, and vocals. And Pete Townshend credited with everything else: keyboards, guitars, vocals, cello, banjo, and sound effects. Now let's get started with the music. All songs were written by Pete Townshend. The album starts off with sounds of waves crashing on the sea with the wind blowing. The song acts as the overture of the album and introduces hints of the four members' themes that we'll hear later in the album. Remember, the character Jimmy is a quadrophenic. He has 4 separate personalities. Each one is based on a member of the band. Engineer Ron Nevison said that assembling the field recordings and sound effects were problematic in the studio because Pete produced the album single-handedly, saying that everything started when Pete got there and everything finished when Pete left, end quote. The song ends with Roger screaming, "Can you see the real me? Can ya? Can ya?" Whoa, the song is at full blast. I didn't even adjust the audio in between songs here. The song is simply called The Real Me, but Pete always referred to it as Can You See the Real Me, rather than the abbreviated title. In Pete's original demo, there's an alternate version of the song, a much slower tempo, and includes another verse about rock and roll in general. This version is featured on his solo album, Scoop 3. The song introduces us to our main character Jimmy, screaming at his mother, the preacher, and his shrink, challenging them to truly see him. Pete Townshend said in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, "You have the big bass of John Entwistle, the big drums of Keith Moon, the power chords, the huge voice of Roger Daltrey, and what they're actually saying is, 'I'm a pathetic little wimp,'" end quote. Speaking of Entwistle, he said the bass part was recorded on a Gibson Thunderbird in one take and claimed he was joking around when he played the part, but the band loved it and used it in the final version. The song is seen by many to be a bass solo with vocals. He did have to spend several weeks during the summer arranging and recording the horn parts though. The band first performed the song on their 1973 tour as a medley with the tape track I Am the Sea, and was played until the end of their French tour the following year, this time without I Am the Sea. For that purpose, it was released as a single backed with Dr. Jimmy in France and Belgium. The song was also released as a single in the US and Canada on January 12, 1974, backed with I'm One, which we'll hear in a little bit. After the tour in 74, we wouldn't hear the song live again until 1979, where it was used frequently to close the concerts. It remained a fixture until 1981 and was brought back on their 1989 reunion tour. It was played at every show on their 1996-97 tour, on which Quadrophenia was played in its entirety and continued to play it until Entwistle's death in 2002. The song was brought back in 2007 with Pino Palladino taking over the bass role. However, the bass wasn't as prominent as it was in the original version. It was also featured on every show for the 2012-13 Quadrophenia and More tour, which again featured the entire album. It was also performed on the 2019 Moving On tour, where the core band was augmented by a 40-piece orchestra. The band was known to stretch out the song with an extended instrumental jam. A notable example was at the Rainbow Theatre in London on February 3rd, 1981, when the song reached 12 minutes. These extended jams became far less after Entwistle died. I wish I had more to say on this. It's a 6-minute instrumental piece full of synthesizers. This is the first time of many times that we hear what I like to call the Quadrophenia theme being used. But I'm fine with that. It's such an immersive bit of the track that I welcome it every time I hear it throughout the album. This song features both Townshend and Daltrey singing, Townshend on the verses and Daltrey in the chorus. Our character Jimmy remembers an argument with his parents and trying to find a place to fit in, home, work, and with the mods. We hear a BBC News report talking about the riots in Brighton between the mods and the rockers, events where Jimmy was at the previous week, along with the whistling tea kettle which ends the track, indicating that we're back in the kitchen. To quote Richie Utenberger of AllMusic, one of the record's iconic moments. The song opens with clanging power chords, perfectly interspersed percussion, and majestic vocals. This track is trademark Who, period, end quote. Again with vocals shared between Daltrey and Townshend, Daltrey on the verses and chorus, and Townshend on the bridge. Sony ATV Music Publishing said, "The song is set in time signature of common time. It is composed in the key of A major with Daltrey's vocal ranging from D3 to B4. Entwistle provided a melodic bass line that is very prominent in this song." The song has a slightly varied name between the UK release and the US release, known as The Punk Meets the Godfather on the US release versus The Punk and the Godfather on the UK release. "No surprise, I told lies, I'm the punk in the gutter." Daltrey sings this line before reprising a little bit of My Generation. Pete Townsend said, "The hero goes to a rock concert, he queues up, pays his money, and decides he's going to see the stars backstage as they come out the stage door, and one of them comes up and says, 'F off.' And he suddenly realizes that there's nothing really happening in rock and roll. It's just another cross on his list," end quote. Jimmy is having a crisis that even rock and roll betrayed him. "I have to be careful what I preach. I can't pretend that I can teach. And yet I've lived your future out by pounding stages like a clown." Pete Townsend said in that 1977 Rolling Stone interview, "When I sit and listen to The Punk Meets the Godfather and Quadrophenia, I come closer to defining my state 3 years ago. I was the Godfather when I met 2 of the Sex Pistols recently. I was in an appropriately raging, explosive mood, but I recognized their hunger, triumph pursuant expressions, and began to preach. In 73-74, I was the aging daddy of punk rock. I was bearing a standard I could barely hold up anymore," end quote. The song was performed live, of course, in 73, and has since been a live favorite, being performed on multiple tours since. "Every year is the same, and I feel it again. I'm a loser, no chance to win." The opening line to the song, Jimmy thinks through his disappointment after seeing The Godfather. He finds comfort that while there are no real answers, he accepts he's won. Sometimes the song is called I'm One, at least. Pete Townsend said, "Jimmy contemplates how he hasn't really gotten much going for him, but at least he has the mod lifestyle," end quote. When introducing the song live in 1973, he said, "When I was a nipper, I always used to feel that the guitar was all I had. I wasn't tough enough to be a member of a gang, not good looking enough to be in with the Birds, not clever enough to make it at school, not good enough with the feet to make a good football player. I was an effing loser. I think everybody feels that way at some point. And somehow being a mod, even though I was too old to be a mod really, I wrote the song with that in mind." Jimmy, the hero of the story, is thinking he hasn't got much going on for him, but at least he's won, end quote. The song almost has a country flavor to it with the emphatically sung chorus with the touches of electric guitar interlopers with the acoustic underlay. "Where do you get those blue jeans, faded, patched, secret, so tight?" Apparently mods would never ask a fellow mod where he got his clothes, so this is supposed to represent maybe Jimmy isn't as much of a mod as he thought he was. A remixed version of the song was included in the 1979 film, and that version of the song was released as the B-side to the 1979 remix version of 515. One last thing about the song, after the 1973-74 tour, this song was never performed again with Keith Moon, who sadly passed away in 1978. This song focuses Jimmy's life after he goes to work and has all these undesirable jobs, looking after pigs, driving a local bus, stuff like that. "I'm getting put down, I'm getting pushed around, I'm being beaten every day." The Quadrophenia gatefold points to him being a dustman too, which is a British way of saying garbage man. It says, "Next day I got a job as a dustman. Now I know why people say working to one another. 9 quid for a full week's filthy work. They stuffed it. I left after 2 days with 2 quid in me pocket." The end of the song includes a musical excerpt from The Thunderer, a march by John Philip Sousa, which Ron Nevson recorded while watching a brass band play in Regent's Park. This song is sometimes known as Helpless Dancer, Roger's theme, and is the first of the 4 band members' themes. The song opens with French horn played by Entwistle with some piano chords which drive the rest of the song. Roger recites the lyrics as the mixing has each line come out a different speaker for a neat effect. It's almost like the two are arguing, but not really arguing. Townsend comes in with an acoustic guitar part halfway through the song. This track is meant to summarize Jimmy's disillusionment with class and society, and his anger and bitterness are starting to bubble up under the surface. "You realize that all along, something in us is going wrong. You stop dancing." The song then breaks into "The Kids Are Alright." I was enjoying "The Kids Are Alright." It's a good song. But the song fades out as Jimmy starts asking that question again, "Is it me for a moment?" This song features Daltrey on vocals on the verses and bridge, but Entwistle contributes vocals on the chorus. A great power ballad that Townsend writes in the liner notes that this is about Jimmy's self-doubt. Statements to a stranger, asking for directions, turn from being help to being questions. Some theorize this song is autobiographical. Pete talked about Helpless Dancer and Is It In My Head, saying, "We get a real look at where Jimmy's aggression comes from as he switches into one of his multiple personalities, the tough guy. Jimmy has a conscience that bites fairly deep. His frustration with the world only makes him angrier than he already is. We say that he also possesses self-doubt. He worries about his own part, and he feels that his outlook is clouded by pessimism," end quote. Daltrey's voice is rough and gravelly, full of loathing of class war, yet gets pure when he's asked to let love reign over him. Along with hinting the album's closing track, we hear that Quadrophenia theme I talked about earlier, sometimes called the Love Reign Over Me refrain. Pete explains, Jimmy finally snaps when he sees the girl he likes with one of his friends. In a desperately self-destructive state, he smashes up his scooter and decides to go to Brighton, where he had such a good time with his friends chasing ruffers the week before, as recited through the news broadcast earlier in the story, end quote. I've had enough of trying to love. The song ends in a brutal Roger scream, almost like what you'd hear on Won't Get Fooled Again. This is likely symbolizing Jimmy crashing that Vespa, and this is also where we're going to end our video today. Come back next time to hear how Jimmy's story ends, and if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe so that way you'll know when Part 3 comes out. This has been Awesome Andrew, telling you that Quadrophenia is an awesome album, and I hope to see you guys in Part 3. See you then. John Entwistle on bass. John Entwistle on bass, horns, and some vocals.